All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a massive antitrust case that gets to the very heart of how our digital world actually works. We're breaking down the US versus Google lawsuit, and it all revolves around one simple but unbelievably powerful concept: the default setting.
I mean, really think about it for a second. You get a brand new phone, you open up the browser for the first time, and boom, there's Google. It just feels automatic, doesn't it? Almost like it's the only option. But it turns out that little pre-selected setting is at the absolute center of one of the biggest legal showdowns in tech history.
And this image, well, it gets right to the core of the whole debate. Is Google the king of search because its product is simply the best one out there? Or is it because they've built a system that pretty much makes it the only choice you're ever going to make? That's the billion-dollar question the courts are trying to answer.
So let's get one thing straight. This lawsuit isn't really about whether Google search is good or bad. The government's entire case is focused on how Google got to be the default choice for basically everyone. They're arguing it has less to do with you picking the best product and a whole lot more to do with a very deliberate, very expensive business strategy.
The whole thing officially kicked off back in 2020. That's when the U.S. Department of Justice, you'll hear them called the DOJ, dropped this bombshell lawsuit. They accused Google of illegally maintaining a monopoly over the search market. And believe me, this wasn't just another lawsuit. This was a fundamental challenge to the way big tech does business.
So what's the secret sauce here? Well, it all comes down to these things called distribution agreements. And what's so fascinating is that this isn't some complex bit of code. It's a business deal, plain and simple. Google pays billions of dollars to companies like Apple, Samsung, and your mobile carrier to make sure its search engine is the first one you see. Okay, so as you can probably guess, the government and Google see these deals in completely different ways. I mean, they couldn't be on more opposite sides, and their arguments are what this whole case is built on. So on one hand, the DOJ argues that paying all this money for default placement is an illegal way to keep a monopoly. They say it boxes out rivals like DuckDuckGo or Bing before they even have a chance to compete. But Google fires right back. They say, hey, these are just normal, legal business deals. Their whole argument is that they're just competing hard, paying for prime placement, and that people stick with Google because, well, it's the best product. And hey, they point out you can change it with just a few clicks if you really want to.
But here's where the government's case gets a lot deeper. They argue it's not just about the money changing hands. It's about what those deals create. They claim Google has built this incredibly powerful self-perpetuating cycle, an engine of dominance. Let's see how they say it works.
All right, take a look at this diagram. It really lays out the DOJ's core argument. It all starts with those distribution agreements we talked about. They lead to Google being the default. That default position, naturally, drives a massive amount of usage, which in turn creates this locked-in loop where being on top just makes you stay on top. Let's trace the path. So the first step is super simple. If you're the default, you will automatically get way more users. More users means more searches. And every single one of those searches, every typo, every question, is a piece of data. That data becomes the raw fuel that makes the entire engine run better. And the scale we're talking about here is just mind-boggling. You know how it is. Most of us just stick with the default settings on our devices. So this usage channel, as the lawyers call it, funnels an absolute torrent of search data straight to Google. Way more data than any rival could ever dream of getting. And here's where that loop slams shut. Google takes that gigantic mountain of data and uses it to constantly tweak and improve its search algorithms. That makes the search results better and more accurate. And of course, better results mean you and I are even less likely to ever bother switching away from Google, which reinforces their top spot, and the whole cycle starts all over again. It just feeds itself.
So you might be asking, okay, so what? Why does this data feedback loop even matter? Well, the government argues that this cycle isn't just good for Google, it's actively bad for competition, and in the long run, it's bad for all of us.
Now, this is a really critical point to understand in antitrust cases like this. When we hear consumer harm, we usually think about getting charged higher prices. But search is free, right? So the harm the DOJ is talking about is what we lose. It's the harm of having less choice, of getting a lower quality product than we could have in a competitive market, and a slowdown of new ideas and innovation.
So what does that look like in the real world? Well, the government claims it means we get fewer real alternatives to choose from. It means there's less pressure on Google to come up with the next big thing, or to improve things like, say, our privacy protections. I mean, if they're the only game in town, why would they have to?
In this slide, this really wraps up the government's entire argument in one picture. You have the giant incumbent, Google, with this incredible scale thanks to the data loop. Then you have a new company trying to break in, but they just can't get enough data to make their search engine good enough to compete. It's like trying to start a race when your opponent already has a million-mile head start. It effectively blocks anyone new from ever having a real shot.
So let's bring this all back home. This isn't just some abstract legal fight happening in a courtroom somewhere. The decision in this case could actually change our day-to-day online experience for years to come.
And this quote just nails the central problem perfectly. Yeah, that data feedback loop might give us a slightly better search result today. But is that tiny, short-term improvement worth the long-term cost of a market with no real competition and less innovation? That's the tension at the very heart of this case.
And in the end, it really all boils down to this one big question. In our digital world, when one option is pre-selected for billions of people, what's actually more powerful? Having the best product or simply being the default choice? That's what the court has to grapple with, and it's definitely something for all of us to think about.